They met at a party. Wine, laughter, two strangers, locked eyes across a crowded room. At that moment, it felt like fate, like something was pulling them together, invisible, irresistible. He remembers how she smiled, how her voice made the room quieter, how the world seemed to pause. And just like that, it began. Text, messages at midnight, calls that lasted for hours, weekend getaways, morning coffees, shared playlists. Everyone said they were perfect. They believed it too. They moved in, planned a wedding, shared passwords, merged lives. It felt like forever, because when you're inside the high, you don't see the cliff. But here's the part no one warns you about. Love, at least the kind that makes you feel like you're floating, isn't designed to last. Not because it's fake, but because it's chemical. Biologically, falling in love is almost identical to being high. Dopamine, oxytocin, serotonin. The brain lights up. Focus narrows. Flaws disappear. You're not choosing. You're reacting. And during this phase, the wedding happens. The mortgage is signed. The kids are planned. You commit, while your brain is still drunk on emotion. No one tells you the euphoria has an expiration date, usually around 18 to 24 months. Then it fades. And when it fades, you're left staring at someone you never really saw clearly. The quirks become annoying. The silence becomes heavy. The warmth becomes work. But we call this marriage. We call this the next stage of love. They say, this is when the real work begins. But no one asks, what if that real work is actually killing who you are? Because here's the secret, most couples never say out loud. They miss who they were before the marriage began. He used to laugh more. She used to dream bigger. Now, they fight over toothpaste and dinner plans. And slowly, without even noticing, they stop being lovers. They become roommates, project managers, co-parents, strategic partners in survival. And every now and then, when he's driving alone or folding laundry at 10 p.m., a thought creeps in. Is this it? But he never says it out loud. Neither does she. They just keep going, because that's what everyone else is doing. But deep down, they know something's been lost, and no one told them how to get it back. At first, compromise felt like kindness. He thought, if I bend a little, she'll feel safe. She thought, if I give in now, he'll be happy. One small sacrifice, then another, and another. They gave up their favorite coffee shops for convenience. They dropped hobbies to make space for chores. They stopped seeing old friends because schedules never matched. At first, it was voluntary. Then it became routine. And soon, it was invisible. But compromise has a cost. Piece by piece. You stop being you. Your jokes change. Your wardrobe changes. Even the music you listen to shifts. He once loved silence. Jazz at dawn. Writing in a notebook. Now, he wakes to alarms. Lists on the fridge. Appointments he never wanted. She once loved bright colors. Road trips without plans. Late-night walks. Now, she checks calendars, budget sheets, and wonders where her spark went. No one forced them. No one shouted. No one demanded. It just happened. Because marriage rewards predictability. It praises the partner who adjusts. It celebrates the one who swallows their needs. Until one day, you've swallowed so much, you forget what you even liked. He looks at his hands now. They're stronger, but they don't build anything for himself anymore. Only obligations. She looks at her reflection. Her smile is still there, but it's rehearsed. The house is clean. The bills are paid. The kids are fine. But inside, something is missing. He starts noticing small irritations. The way she sighs when he talks. The way she moves things he puts down. She starts noticing his pauses. The way he lingers at the door before coming in. The way he stares at his phone like he's somewhere else. They tell themselves, this is normal. They remind each other, we're lucky. But luck feels heavy when you're living a life you don't recognize. He still touches her shoulder at dinner. She still asks about his day. But the warmth isn't there. It's duty now. And duty without desire turns love into labor. They still smile in pictures. Still send Christmas cards. Still post anniversary photos. But in private, they wonder, when did this stop feeling like home? This is the slow death no one sees. Not the screaming fights. Not the dramatic affairs. But the quiet erosion of self. The way you give little pieces of your soul, until one day, there's nothing left to give. He notices it on a Sunday. She's reading in the living room. He's in the kitchen making coffee. No fight, no tension, just a silence that feels like distance. He wants to ask her, "Are you happy?" But he doesn't, because he's afraid of the answer. She wants to ask him, "Do you miss me?" But she doesn't, because she's afraid he already does. And so they sit, two people in the same house, separate worlds, both pretending not to feel the weight. He remembers the man he used to be. She remembers the woman she used to be. But the versions of themselves they fell in love with no longer exist. They have become caregivers, roommates, negotiators, and in the quiet of that living room, while the coffee cools and the book stays open on the same page, they both know this isn't a marriage anymore. It's a contract, but no one tears it up, because no one wants to be the villain, because everyone told them marriage was work, because they're not sure who they'd be without it. This is the part most people never talk about. The part where love doesn't explode. It evaporates, and the people left behind are strangers with shared memories. It didn't happen on a bad day. There was no shouting, no suitcase at the door, no affair. It was a Tuesday. Ordinary. Quiet. He was tying his shoes when he realized he didn't want to come home tonight. Not because he hated her, not because he wanted someone else, but because he couldn't remember the last time he felt like himself in his own life. So, he didn't go home right away. He sat in his car after work, engine off. No music, just silence, and for the first time in years. That silence felt like peace. It scared him, because for so long, he believed leaving would make him the bad guy. He stayed for the kids, for stability, for loyalty, for the idea of what love was supposed to be. But now he understood something terrifying. You can love someone deeply and still suffocate next to them. You can be loyal to the marriage and still betray yourself every single day you stay. So he left. Not with rage, not with blame. Just absence. She asked why. He couldn't answer right away. Because how do you explain that the version of you she fell in love with was gone, that he tried to stay, tried to bend, tried to adjust? But the more he stayed, the more he disappeared. He didn't leave her. He left the ghost of himself that had been haunting that house for years. That's the rebellion no one talks about. It's not loud. It's not violent. It's quiet. It's a man choosing himself for the first time in decades. And it's not heroic. It's heartbreaking, because it means admitting that the dream died long before the marriage did. She cried. Of course she did. He did too. Not because it ended, but because they both knew they were never taught how to stay without shrinking. They were never taught that love without authenticity is a cage dressed like a commitment. So, here's the truth no one admits. Most marriages don't die from cheating. They die from silence, from unspoken needs, from slow resentments, from sacrificing identity in the name of togetherness. They die when two people wake up and realize they're not partners in love anymore. They're survivors of a shared routine. And in that moment, when one finally walks away, it's not an escape. It's a burial of a version of life that looked good on paper but felt empty in the soul. He didn't find a new woman, didn't move to another city. He stayed nearby, rented a small place, learned to cook for one, started walking again. He bought himself a record player, read the books he left untouched for years, spent weekends in silence. No errands, no demands, just space, People asked if he was okay. He smiled, not because he was happy, but because he was finally honest. Some days felt heavy, the kind of heavy you don't talk about, but most days they felt lighter than before, because he wasn't pretending anymore. He wasn't performing anymore. He was building something he hadn't touched in years himself. So if you see a man alone at a cafe, reading quietly, not looking around for anyone, not scrolling his phone, just being, don't pity him. Don't assume he lost something. Maybe. And for the first time he found it. Because not all endings are failures. Some are returns. To the self, to the silence, to the kind of peace that only comes when you stop apologizing for needing it. They say he left too soon, but the truth is he stayed too long. And when he finally walked away, he didn't run. He didn't slam the door. He simply closed it, quietly, for good.